I started off doing the show in the throes of my addiction. A couple of years later, getting sober and then being a sober person in that same environment that quite honestly was very triggering for me. There's a lot of active addiction and dysfunction in environments like that. I had to share dressing rooms with people who I used to party with a few stations down. I used to have to show up to work and interact with the drug dealer that I used to get drugs from who worked in the theater.
Jason LaChance, your host of the Knockin Doors Down podcast. I'm excited to speak with my guest, Stephen Washington. He's a former Broadway dancer who appeared in the Disney's Lion King, amongst other many great shows. And his recovery journey and what he's doing with it is nothing short of spectacular. But I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you about the rotten strawberry in the bunch. Recently, I was thinking about the way that I was changing thoughts that I had in my head about myself. And oddly, I was picking through some fruit in the refrigerator, and there was this beautiful basket of strawberries. But in that basket, there was one that was rotten, and it started to mess with all the other strawberries in there as well and rot them out. So once I removed those, washed everything off and gave it a clean rinse, of course, the rest of those strawberries stayed for like another week. So it just made me think of sometimes the way that we can think about ourselves. So if you have a negative thought that's repeating in a story that you tell yourself, please, because you're amazing, take that rotten strawberry, throw it away, wash off the rest of them, and continue on thinking good and positive about yourself because you deserve it and you're worth it. And my guest is a movement master, author, recovery advocate who's passionate about helping others navigate towards a happier, healthier life. His lifelong love and key foundation to his own spiritual fitness is movement. And we're going to get into that. And he firmly believes our relationships with our body is vital for emotional, physical, and spiritual health. He's also the author of Recovering You, Soul Care and Mindful Movement for Overcoming Addiction. And it's a wonderfully unique book. I've been digging into it. It really focuses on his practices of Qigong and so much more. So, Stephen Washington, thanks for joining me on Knockin' Doors Down.
Thank you, Jason. So nice to be here with you. Great to be in your presence.
Oh, likewise, likewise. It's always great when we get I get a connection from someone that I have so much respect. Our mutual friend Michelle Curel set us up the sobriety playbook, and it's like, oh, I know I'm gonna love this guy.
That's great. It is always nice to find those connections with people and then they connect you to another person and then to another person and you also realize just how small the world is and how we're not so unique, right? There's so many common threads between all of our stories. So yeah, I really appreciate when moments like this happen.
Yes, absolutely. Well, one of my things, I guess, to segue off of appreciation is that daily gratitude practice, something that I don't know about you, I very much took for granted in my addiction. And so I just like to start with three things you're grateful for today.
Mm. I'm grateful that I had a really good night's sleep. I'm grateful that I have a beautiful cat named BB who
Oh,
just lights me up every time I look at her. And I'm grateful for my sobriety today because everything else that I have, I wouldn't have it. I
yeah,
wouldn't have it if I weren't sober. I wouldn't have the relationship I have with all those things and people if I weren't sober.
yeah. And it's fun, Steve, we have a cat, and recently our AC unit went out. And so, for people that may not understand, as of this recording is like 114 here. So, our biggest concern was for our cat, and it really is a beautiful thing and I didn't think about that till now. Yeah, when I wasn't sober, I wouldn't have given a darn.
Yeah.
And it's sad. It's sad because we really do have these beautiful things that we get to connect with. She's the most wonderful, loving thing. Now, granted, don't get me wrong. She is a cat. She can be a turd and scratch up the couch and other stuff.
Has her moments.
Yes. But that's what cats do. Like, if you have an
Yeah.
expectation that a cat isn't going to do that, well, then don't get a cat.
I used to have cats before this cat, and this was like early on in my sobriety. And there was a time when I used to expect my cat to behave more like a person than a cat. Like I couldn't understand. I didn't understand just the way that cats are. What's their nature? And I kept expecting her to be something that she wasn't. And with this beautiful cat and her sister, who I no longer have, I I understand now that cats are cats. They're gonna do what they do and just enjoy them as they are. It's been a completely different experience now. It sounds elementary for me to say that, but I'm a slow learner. So I
Well,
get there, but it takes me a while.
welcome to the club. I've always used the term late bloomer, but I think slow learner is more appropriate for sure. But you know what? That's beautiful what you said, because that acceptance, I think people, we'll call them normies that haven't struggled with the addiction, may not understand, or maybe even get a chance to ever understand, with this. I mean, I'm so grateful for my recovery as well, because I see life so different, and I've gotten so much better about the acceptance of things as they are.
There's freedom in that. There's freedom in that. It's not always easy to, because accepting something doesn't necessarily mean that you like it. It just means that it is what it is, and there's no matter how much I may try to change it or want something else, it's not in the cards for it to be that way. So the best thing that I can do is go with the flow of life and accept the things that I can't change. And there is freedom, because from there I can choose. I can choose. I have choice. I have freedom. It took me a while to figure that out. Same thing like with the cats, and once I was able to do that, it opened up a whole door for me. You remind me of how when I was in active addiction, I was moving through life like this with blinders on. All I could see was this. I couldn't see this. And in recovery, it gives me this ability to zoom out and see the bigger picture
Mm.
of my experience and of my life. And from there, it's like there's so much more possibility. And I'm not also just reacting to life. I'm responding to it. And I hope I'm responding well. I do it to varying degrees, depending upon where I am in my spiritual fitness. But we get a chance to respond to life instead of reacting to it.
And let me ask your take on this, because I've been exploring a lot more consciousness. I mean, I've had some beautiful people come into my life again through this recovery thing that shows the world as big as it is. It's small, Michelle, one of them, TJ Woodward. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. But just that really beautiful exploration of consciousness, and like you're saying, not being able to examine the peripheral, blinders on, my way forward, and that's it, because that's the only, because I was so struggling just to hold on. So, of course, that's it. But I was very much in reflection, in a constant state of fight or flight, or freeze for that matter.
Hmm. Absolutely. I think you're just trying to survive,
Hmm.
trying to survive. And recovery has been about not just surviving, but thriving. Thriving. That's the thing. And having the best quality of life that I could have, because the quality of my life when I was in active addiction wasn't very good, even though on the outside it may have looked good. Like I think when I was in active addiction, just before I got sober, I had my dream job of dancing in a Broadway show. Like from the outside looking in, I had it all. I had it all. But I was dying on the inside. I was slowly killing myself. Um, and so recovery has just been this magical, this amazing gift that just keeps revealing more things for me to be grateful for. And it doesn't mean that my life is perfect or that I don't have difficult times. I mean, this past 2 years have been 2.5 years have been probably the most difficult in my life. I
Hmm.
got a divorce and sobriety after 8 years of being together. Had to, basically start over. Um, was dealing with depression and anxiety. And I'd always heard about how that sometimes it's possible in long-term recovery that people find themselves um, feeling depressed or dealing with other mental health issues. But I'm so grateful that through all that, I never let go of my recovery. I never let go of my sobriety. I never chose to pick up. I never chose to check out. And I just kept uh, trying to do the next right thing and asking for help, turning to my higher power, um, going to meetings, sharing about what was going on. Um, yeah, and then things change,
Mhm.
things shift, things change.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing that and being so vulnerable. I mean, that's just, I mean, these are everyday things that are just tough to go through. But like you said, I recently, like we were joking, AC went out the house. There's some other things going on, career wise or challenges. I got teenagers,
oh
all
boy.
these, yeah, all these different things. And it is that. And I hold on to two things. A, like you said, just don't pick up. And I keep the memories of how I was when I operated in such an unhealthy way with these terrible coping mechanisms, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, how I felt, and thus the result of what my life was. Like, some people may not get it, but like, I can remember exactly what those terrible hangovers that came with the anxiety and depression feel like, just like that.
Yeah, same,
Yeah.
same. So grateful for that.
Where you are now may not be where you came from. The choices you make today may spiral out of control or spin you in the right direction. Discover a riveting, true story of how Carlos Vieira nearly destroyed his life and lived to tell about it. Stand up, stand firm, believe, make it happen, and live through the madness. Knocking doors down along the way. And don't miss others telling their powerful stories on our podcast. Visit kddmediacompany.com.
So grateful that even though my last drink or drug is very far back in my rearview mirror, I can still remember those horrible moments of like being in my apartment by myself, doing lines of doing lines of coke and drinking because cocaine lets you drink as much as you want.
Right.
And just being miserable and looking at myself in the mirror and not recognizing who I saw back at me and just saying, God, help me. Just a simple prayer like that, just help me because I knew that what was happening, what I was doing was not me living to my full potential. Uh, that that wasn't my best self at that moment. And I didn't know how to get out of it. So I was like, I need help. And then about probably a year and a half, 2 years later, is when I finally quit. When I finally had reached the bottom of my bottom, which I hope is the bottom of my bottom. Bottoms, of course. But but yeah, but I reached out to someone for help, and they reached back, and they took me to my first meet.
That's
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes it really does. I posted a video yesterday that my original sober date was July 4th, and then I ended up having a slip up, relapse, whatever people want to call it. It lasted a very short period of time, but it happened. But I still remember that wonderful self-reflection 6 years ago, as of the 4th of July,
Mm,
of being like, goodness, I've finally asked for help. I finally asked for help. It wasn't, and I had gone to meetings before, but it was like, oh yeah, I'm here for something else, somebody else. And it was the first time for me that I asked for help and
that's
took it.
yeah, that's interesting. When I got sober, I had never been to a meeting before. Like I went and luckily I stayed, but I know a lot of people who had, gone in and out or had been exposed to 12-step recovery earlier in their lives and eventually decided to stay, but I had never been exposed to it. No one else in my family had gotten sober. No one else was able to do it. I look at myself and probably much like yourself, a cycle breaker
Yes.
family, like breaking that cycle of addiction, breaking cycles of generational trauma.
Mm. Well, that leads me to my other curiosity. Of course, I know you outlay a lot of your life in your book, which that link is in the podcast description if people want to inquire about getting Stephen's book. But I'm really curious about little Stephen. You mentioned, this family cycle, the generational trauma, which, hey, people, it is a real
It's
thing.
real.
Like we could probably do a whole 60 minutes on that. But
Mhm.
I it's so fascinating. I mean, I'm sitting here wondering because you danced in The Lion King, right?
Mhm.
So
Yes.
so yeah, it's like it's so interesting where it's like that outward thing. I mean, I'm even wondering like, goodness, did he dance in San Francisco? I might have seen you dance. I don't know. But that outside perception that like everything's good and fine. Look at that. Look at Steven. I mean, he's dancing in a Broadway show. It's Disney's Lion King, one of the biggest, productions to date, I think. I think it's the biggest as far as
Yeah.
revenue. I can't recollect, but it's
Yeah.
those things that people see and they just go, yeah, no, he's great, and it's a sign that oftentimes that's so not the case.
Yeah. And you were my gosh, oof, you just took me back. You took me back to my years of doing that show. And I had the blessing of joining that production. I started off in Canada doing it in Toronto, and then eventually I made my way to Broadway and then the national tour. But I started off doing the show in the throes of my addiction. And then a couple of years later, getting sober and then being a sober person in that same environment that quite honestly was very triggering for me. There's a lot of active addiction and dysfunction in environments like that. And I had to share dressing rooms with people who I used to party with,
Mm.
right? Just a few stations down. I used to have to show up to work and interact with the drug dealer that I used to get drugs from, who worked in the theater. Um, so it was a really powerful journey of truly changing within myself, but my outside world wasn't changing, but my perception of it was shifting because I had chosen a different path for myself. I would never, I wouldn't give up or throw away any of those memories of the time that I had doing that amazing show. I had an amazing experience. I did things that, many would just dream of doing, like, walking on stilts and being suspended in midair and flipping and singing and dancing and just telling that beautiful story. Um, but there's just so many things that like life presents us with, the good, the bad, and everything in between. And so my story as it relates to that time of my life and that experience is mixed with so much, but it's made me who I am and I like who I am. And it's given me so many gifts, so many
Yes.
lessons. So yeah,
Yes.
we don't
Yes.
regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it.
Yes. Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
And thank you for sharing that too, because I think it's so important for people to understand, I mean, I see it, and it's not just people that struggle with addiction, but just in life in general of that. Well, isn't this my arrival moment? Isn't this where I should be? Shouldn't I feel really good? And I think it was, I'm a big Formula One fan, even got my Lewis Hamilton stuff on here. That's my
I
guy.
noticed. Yeah,
Yeah. And,
nice.
and him talking about, people like, well, you've had 7 championships. Why don't you stop now? And he's like, I still love what I do. And what I do allows me to do my purpose. because he's helping so many youth get into engineering programs. And I mean, he's just done beautiful things with his hard work and beautiful dedication of his family that helped him get there. All the
Mhm.
stuff that he's been through turned all of that negative stuff where he could be a bitter person. I mean, the extreme racism and just everything else that he's had to face and probably still does from a certain amount of the quote unquote fan base that say god awful, terrible, inhumane things. And he's still doing beautiful things. And I just have so much respect for that, for someone that figured out their values and because of their values knows what their purpose is. And I don't think you can have a quote unquote purpose without understanding your values.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I 100% agree with you. And I love that one of the things about recovery is that we're able to clear away all the things that were in the way of being able to tap into your purpose, tap into really why you're here. It's hard to do that when you're just trying to survive
Mm.
and you're slowly poisoning yourself. It's hard to do that. But what a gift it is to be able to tap into your purpose and be of service. And there's so many ways that we can serve one another. And I feel really blessed. And I look at you, I see you as a mirror in terms of what you're doing, like with this podcast and everything else that you do, how you have definitely tapped into your purpose and you're in that flow of life, that creative flow. And all we can do is share it. We can share it with others.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Have you dug into the archives of past Knockin' Doors Down podcast episodes? The Knockin' Doors Down podcast archive is available to you for free. Check it out. Here's a snippet from when Charlie Sheen was on the podcast.
There's another thing to consider that's just practical and real and true and rampant. Fentanyl.
Yeah.
Fentanyl. You keep fucking around with street drugs these days. I mean, there's a 90% chance that it's gonna have fentanyl. And there's a 90% chance you're not going to survive it.
This episode and so many more in the Knockin' Doors Down archive. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumb up, leave a comment, and share with somebody else that you know will get value out of the Knockin' Doors Down podcast.
Speaking of that, sharing with others, have you faced some of the resistance when you made the decision to recover out loud? I had some people early on in this, I'm like, hey, I'm here to protect your anonymity. It doesn't say anything about mine.
Yeah. It's funny, when I was writing this book, I had a lot of internal struggle about whether or not to do it because I was going to break my anonymity. And also, I didn't want to give anyone the impression that I was trying to promote 12-step recovery,
Mm-hmm.
or that I was trying to be a salesperson for it. That's not it. All I could do is just share my experience with it. And I thought that in order for me to do what I felt so called to do, that I would have to reinvent the wheel. And it didn't require me to reinvent the wheel. It just required just me sharing my experience, strength, and hope, and sharing the things that have helped me in my recovery, and just give people a sense of hope
Mm-hmm.
through the pages of the book. But I did have these thoughts of, like, I imagine folks were just gonna come out of the woodwork and just say, "How could you?" Or, this is not right, or what have you. But I feel as though, as far as anonymity is concerned, I feel like the world has changed so much since 12-step recovery began.
Mm-hmm.
The world is very different. The internet has changed everything, connected us all in really powerful ways, sometimes for good and sometimes for not. But it's a different world, and the thing is, we're able to reach so many more people. And my sharing my story or parts of my story in a public way can reach someone who is struggling and sees me and identifies with me and sees that there is hope. They wouldn't get that if I was just silent and didn't share my story.
Yeah.
And and I don't share my story because I want somebody to pat me on the back. I don't want anybody to look at me as if I've got it all figured out, as if I don't need more answers. It's an ongoing journey of discovery and recovery. Um, but I think that the benefits or the positive aspect or byproduct of me stepping outside of myself far outweigh any of the other things that were threatening to keep me silent
Right.
about it. You
Yeah.
identify, you agree? You identify?
I do. And I thank you. And I do because I think when we do, and I'm like you, hey, 12-step worked for me. I've seen so many other paths. I've seen people go through treatment and cognitive behavioral therapy, smart recovery, just getting involved in their community. I have a friend that he, as of this recording, 5 years sober today. We used to party together. And for him, it was an exploration of his passion for reptiles, and he found a community. And within that, he found a whole bunch of other people that, as well, had don't drink or had issues and got clean and stuff. And that's where he found it. It's like, I'm not
I
here to
get
tell
that.
you, for me, a good step was, and I miss it. My jujitsu instructor, he moved back to Brazil. But for me, that was such a great, loving environment when I had it. And we kind of kept going right at the beginning of the pandemic. We're like, okay, nobody's going to come, you know, but it was great. It was great for me. And I noticed I struggled when that went away. Unfortunately, he had to return home and hasn't been able to come back. And I don't know if he wants to. But you never know where you're going to find it. And so I think it gives people permission to go, oh, I'm not the only person that has ever felt I need help and I need to reach out somewhere. If it's spiritual teachings, be that a church group, a mosque, Buddhist practices, whatever it is, you always wanted to dance. You join a dance group, whatever, and you build community, whatever it is. I think it gives other people permission to go, I'm not alone in these feelings of helplessness, and there is a way out. And I think that's the beautiful thing that we can do. That's why I keep doing this. There's not one episode that goes by that somebody doesn't go, wow, thank you for having that person on. They are amazing, and I know it's going to happen. Somebody's going to be curious about qigong and what you're doing and everything else, and they're going to check it out. And I think it's that beautiful giving others permission and letting them know they're not alone.
Absolutely. You remind me of just how important community is. And in the pages of the book, I wanted to provide community.
Mhm.
I wanted to provide people with a sense of community by hearing my story, by hearing the stories of my friends who I interviewed for the book. And because I know that it's a healing thing to have social support. We all need social support. And so everything that you mentioned, the common thread is just people coming together with a common interest or a common goal. And so I always encourage people in my work to find whatever works for them. What worked for me might not work for you. Take what you need, leave the rest. It's all good. And I love that you just mentioned Qigong. I just want to just for a moment, just tell you and your audience about how that came into my life.
Please, I was going to ask you that.
Yeah. So one of the things that I saw in my earlier years of recovery was people later in life in recovery going back to school, getting furthering their education. So many of us, when we were earlier on in our lives, we were probably drinking and using and probably weren't great in school. A lot of things going on that distract you from that. So that was definitely my story. But people were inspiring me to think about that. And so I thought about that about 8 or 9 years of sobriety. I looked into that and I thought, oh, hey, I want to go and become a Chinese medicine doctor. And I get into a school. I move all the way to California from New York City to do this. I have to take a ton of courses just to catch up because I had made such a mess academically before that I had to make it all up. So I did that and I worked my ass off. And then I finally got accepted to a school and I joined this program. And very quickly, I became really overwhelmed.
Hmm.
Became really overwhelmed. A lot of stuff that I thought I had healed from my younger years of wanting to fit in, wanting to belong, feeling like an outsider, um, not feeling worthy. All that stuff started to come up, and I started to have horrible panic attacks while in graduate school, and just a lot of anxiety, and it was getting in the way of the work, me being able to do the work. And I was led to a lot of different things to help me. I asked for help from fellow students who were ahead of me and who were doing well. I went to meetings. I shared about it in meetings. I worked with my sponsor on it. I stopped drinking so much caffeine because that wasn't helping me with my anxiety. I learned how to study better, a lot of different things. But one of the things that had one of the greatest impacts on me was learning Qigong. And Qigong was part of the program. And for folks who don't know what Qigong is, it's an ancient Chinese healthcare system that combines flowing movement, standing postures, deep breathing, and focused intention to activate and cultivate and circulate life force energy. When you take the word Qi, it means energy and breath, and Gong means work or skill. And when we practice Qigong, we become more skillful at managing our own energy, physically and mentally, emotionally, spiritually. So I started to learn this practice, and I noticed how it was helping me to regulate my nervous system because I was so dysregulated through those weeks of working through that semester. And eventually, what seemed impossible became very possible for me. Like I suddenly was able to function in class, do really well, had a command for all the knowledge I was assimilating. And even with all that, I decided that I was going to leave the program, that I was going to leave the Chinese medicine program. I decided to become a massage therapist instead. But I love that I left the program not because I couldn't do it, because at first I was afraid that I was going to have to walk away because I couldn't do it. I walked away because I chose not to do it. I chose to do something else.
Mm.
One of the things that Qigong gave me was just this ability to zoom out and just see the bigger picture and not think that I couldn't change my mind. I came from a background where if you decide to do something, you got to stick with it. You can't change your mind. If you change your mind, you're a fucking quitter.
Yeah.
You're a cop out, and that's a bunch of BS. We can always change our minds.
Uh,
So
Steven, I can relate when you were saying that, man.
I saw
I,
your eyes light up when I said
oh yeah,
that.
because my mom just such a beautiful person, and being able to kind of go back and examine growing up in that home of addiction. I think me and my mom were kind of, we were thick as thieves. We were just she's my ride or die, and still to this day, she's my favorite person. No offense to my girlfriend might be listening. I adore and love her, and she's an amazing, amazing woman. But it I know it reminded me of the time when I told my mom I hit this huge growth spurt and basketball became more interesting to me than baseball. I mean, come on, I got to see Magic Johnson. Is like, okay, that's way more appealing than pick baseball player here, Will Clark, whoever.
Mhm.
And kind of that disappointment of quitting, so to speak, because I was really good. I mean, an all-star and all these different things. And so yeah, that kind of resonated with me. And my dad, despite his addiction, I mean, that was the hardest working person who's set that example of just like work ethic. Like my dad, he even when he'll kind of has been sober a long time, make statements about some of the disappointments, not being there with my brother and I, or, you
Mm.
know, so he's like, why, I messed up. I fucked up by not sitting down watching Star Wars with you for the 900th time or something, and it's like, it's okay. You're like, understand was my journey still to pull from the good stuff. And that's what I see and take away. It's not that I don't remember the negative stuff, because I do, but it's
Yeah.
not what sits in my heart, you know? And so, yeah, I know that, like, you don't quit, you do this, only losers quit. And I mean, on one hand, it was good for me. I'm dyslexic. School sucked for me. I always felt like an outsider, got made fun of because I went to the special reading class. I even had a teacher that was to me. Are you dyslexic too? I'll be
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm somewhere on that spectrum, and I had to go to the special classes. They used to come and take me out of class, a few of us, and we go to the special class. So much like shame around that. I had to work through all that too. I get it.
Oh
Mhm.
yeah, and and I've been able to talk to some of those people now as adults. They're like, oh my God. Some went, I didn't do that, dude. Shut the fuck up. And then some of them are like, oh man, I'm so sorry. Did I really? And it's like, yeah, I mean, I just kind of wanted to get some resonance with you, and just kind of, I felt I needed for me to kind of speak. And a lot of people, I think about four or five, are like, I'm really sorry. Hey, I was in a bad place in my childhood too. And the fact that they shared that, what they went home to and everything else, it's like, you see the troubled kid, follow them home and see what's going on there.
Mm. Wow. Yeah. Oof. I'm just feeling for all the troubled kids out there,
Yeah.
former troubled kids. We're just acting out what they knew best and just did not know any better.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. We truly did not. We had
Mm.
examples set before us, especially with people that were our heroes, so to speak.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
Ugh. I think that both hit deep for us right there, didn't it?
Yeah, and and I'm not gonna take us down the politics road, but I look at what's being played out politically, and I see a lot of wounded children who've grown up to be adults and are still acting out, but now the consequences are greater.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we get it. I'm not a fan of politicians in general, and especially, and I've encountered some through my work on a personal level. Very few have I gone. I can think of one that I went, wow, I really respect that individual.
yeah,
And it's really sad because we have a lot of do as I say, not as I do going on, and it's sad. I worry for our youth. I worry. I mean, overdose is our number one cause of death in this country.
yeah, yeah,
What does that tell us?
yeah. That and the just the increased levels of loneliness and anxiety and isolation,
Yes,
which leads us to which leads us to commit suicide, which leads us to commit self-harm. And yeah,
it's in abundance, and,
yeah,
I wish we had all the answers here today, but
yeah.
we know it's out there, and we do the best we can with our part and the interactions that we have. It's
Mhm.
a trippy world. Like, I'm going to go back to the AC unit thing real quick here, because I think
Yes,
it
please
was a
do.
it was a beautiful lesson for me in that. So it went out. It was in the evening. Contacted a friend of mine who happens to work for a local electric company. He went, oh, contact this person, and I mean, I was able to get a hold of this individual. He came out and he's like, oh yeah, no, glad you called me. I mean, this was like 20 minutes later. Like, what a blessing from,
Wow.
I'll use the word God. Came out, was the most straight up guy about this. We've all encountered maybe the repairman. He went, no, it's just a component. Like, I'm like, oh, I'm afraid I need a new unit. I heard the fan, all these things. No, it was this, gave him a nice tip. And it made me realize one of my favorite sayings that I learned through recovery is good people know good people. Thus, this conversation.
Oh, yeah, I love
But it
that.
was like my friend, this guy that's him and his wife have stood by me through so much and had my back and been there and let me cry and stay over and all these things. And it's just this nice referral of knowing this. And it was like, wow, that was like, I looked at my partner, looked at her and like, I want to say a blessing for this. And,
Mm-hmm.
she was really moved by that because normally she's kind of the leader of the way in those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Mm-hmm.
was like, what a beautiful blessing. Like it
Mm-hmm.
could have been so much worse. In the past, I would have went catastrophic, would have went this is bullshit. I'm off to the convenience store, bringing home the 30 pack and the bottle of whatever it is. And it was just like, calm, find a solution. Let's work through this. And no
Yeah.
matter what, my partner was there too. Like, all right, we're going to be in this hot house tonight. Hopefully it gets fixed soon, you know?
Yeah.
And it was that processing of that and really being able to take a look at some blessing. Whereas before I'd have went, oh, we're out hundreds of dollars and bitch and moan. And it wasn't that. It was
Yeah.
like such a beautiful experience.
Living life on life's terms.
Yeah, which I don't know. I wasn't too good at, Stephen.
Well, I mean, yeah, you got there. You got there.
I did. I
You,
did.
I have a question for you.
Please.
You mentioned the friends who let you cry on their shoulders, and I thought, has it always been easy for you to cry? Like, what's your experience with that? Because mine has shifted a great deal in my recovery.
Mm. Uh, in my active addiction, it was always alone. It was always alone. Now it's improved. I still have moments. I know there's still so much work to do internally. But I do allow myself to get moved. I do. It's hard. It's still a challenge at times, but I've learned to embrace joy much better. And I always confuse pleasure and joy. I mean, that was a big part of that
Mm-hmm.
character defect, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's, I've talked to some young, I don't know about you newcomers, and then they'll bring up like sex or something. I'm like, oh, yeah, it's a very joyous experience. Like, what? What the hell are you talking about, joy? I'm like, no, no, no. There is pleasure included in that, but that's the bottom. That's like way down below.
Yes.
It's not the priority. In my experiences, it's not the priority,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's real talk. That's real talk.
Yeah. I mean,
Sure.
because which one of us addicts haven't struggled with all those areas, right? I mean, it comes with the territory.
Hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
I know for me, what I know, and maybe it also has to do with just growing older. I'm gonna be 53 in December, not December, November.
Damn, people tell me I aged well.
It's the filters. I got the filter now. No, I'm,
BS,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
BS.
Good genes, and staying being sober. Um,
Yes.
yeah, like I just feel as though it was very hard for me to express my emotions when I was in active addiction. Like it was not that I couldn't at all, but it would just take so much for me to express how I was feeling, to be vulnerable in that way. And slowly but surely through my recovery, and it's also been, in part having great experiences of loss, like losing my father, losing my stepmother, cracked me open
Mm.
in a really big way in my early sobriety, and then you know almost 10 years into it, and then my whole Chinese medicine experience also cracked me open another layer, and then getting divorced this past year um cracked me open even more, where my tears, whether they're tears of sadness or tears of joy is just beneath the surface.
Mm.
I feel really grateful to be able to access all that, because when I first got sober, I said to my first sponsor how I expressed to him how afraid I was of my emotions. Like I used to be afraid of my anger. I thought if I got angry and really let my anger out, I wouldn't be able to stop it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And he just encouraged me to not be to feel the fear, but still keep moving forward and trusting the process of recovery. and that I would have whatever it is that I needed when I would reach those pivotal moments when I felt afraid of how I would respond or react to my life and circumstances in my life. And he was absolutely right. And now I'm so grateful for all of the, like, I think of emotions like colors, like the colors of the rainbow. And I'm so grateful that I have the ability to experience all the different colors of that rainbow emotionally. And it makes me a better, stronger, more resilient person. And it also helps me to connect to other people more because I know what it's like to feel joy. I know what it's like to feel sadness and grief and regret and anger and resentment and confusion, all the different things that one can feel. I just feel like I'm more of a full human being. Whereas before, when I was drinking and using, I was a little bit of a robot,
Mhm.
on automatic pilot,
Mhm.
and not really present, not really present. I was always somewhere else, or trying
Yeah.
to get somewhere else than where I was in the moment.
Yep. Yeah.
Mm.
I and I think it's important to take a look at those things. There's secondary emotions, anger, and I don't know. Have you ever seen the Adam Sandler movie Anger Management?
Parts of it.
Okay. I don't know if you remember where he's on the flight and there's the guy that's on the plane and calm down, sir. And he's like, I'm calm. What are you talking about? Like that was me angry. It was like the guy that was like, what are you talking about? Not realizing like how much passive anger was sitting inside me. And it
Mm.
was the digging like, well, what's under that anger? Oh, resentment and all these other. So there was really being able to take a look better at the drivers of these other emotions. Fear, like what am I really afraid of? Oh, embarrassment. Oh, what's that connected to? Oh, I felt really embarrassed as a kid, which is ironic as someone that, I mean, my career's been performing. I did a 20 plus year radio career, this hosting various events, be it mixed martial arts or charity events or what. It's like that weird ironic part of being a performer. We're so fragile, right?
Yeah.
uh
Yeah, but it's that fragility that just adds to what makes us so good at what we do.
mm, mm-hmm.
I really do believe that. It makes me think of my friend of mine, this author, Anita Morjani. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, and if your listeners have ever heard of her. She wrote an amazing book called Dying to Be Me. It's about her near-death experience of from dying from cancer and then coming back to life, and how when she came back to life, how her cancer was gone, and how uh, she just had a whole new perspective on life, and she really became more of herself.
Sure.
But she wrote another book recently, not that long ago, called "Sensitive is the New Strong."
Hmm.
Yeah, for those of us out there who are very, very sensitive, that's actually a strength instead of a liability.
Because we do see it that way.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
do. I know for me, it was like that liquid courage armament, so to speak.
of course. Yeah, yeah. So much so for me too. Yeah, even the smoking cigarettes was like part of my armor. Made me tough, made me cool. Maybe you'll accept me more because I smoke, things like
Right.
that. I'm so glad I don't smoke anymore.
The things we try to project, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Progress, not perfection.
Yes. I mean, I can even think about, like tattoos initially was to gain a greater law of attraction at one point. Now it's like, oh, I just love the art form and
Beautiful. I was noticing that your arm is beautiful. I love all the
thank you.
colors. It's just
Oh
so
yeah.
beautiful. Like, wow.
And
Yeah.
ironically, my tattoo artist brother in recovery too, and so it's like even that strengthened our relationship. Like I go in, I sit down for 5 6 hours or something, and we have these amazing conversations.
6 hours.
Yeah,
Wow. Wow.
yeah.
Like you had to do a project like that. It takes hours. Wow.
Yeah,
You
well,
take break? You take a lunch break?
well, takes it. Yeah, he takes break. We take breaks in there. We take
Good.
breaks. Yeah. Well, before we get to some random questions, I do want to ask you, where did that passion for dance come from? I people always crack up. Was in high school participating in a thing called dance company. People are like, oh, you were dancing? No, no, my girlfriend was in it. I was a decent actor. They put me in the way back, but I do love dance. I'm just not the best at it. Kind of got one gimp leg, so to speak, when it comes to trying to dance.
I was born with it. My joke is that I came out of my mother's womb dancing, and that's an exaggeration, but not by much because I found it very early on. One of my earliest memories is of myself dancing in the living room of our apartment in Connecticut on a green shack carpet, dancing to Grace Jones or Stephanie Mills on the radio or the record player, and just dancing and just losing myself in it, losing myself, losing time, and just enjoying it. And that eventually just led me to being drawn to the arts. I thought I was initially going to be a theater major and just do acting and singing, but I attended a high school that had a dance program as well, and so I just started taking dance class, and I realized that I was really, so it was something that I excelled at, and that was really where my passion existed. And it began from there. And then I made my way to New York City and went to NYU and was in the dance department there. And then I had a long dance career in New York for over 20 years. And I still dance, but I dance for myself now, or I dance for the people who follow me on social media. I do this thing where I dance and I talk. I talk about something, a topic. I talk about something that's interesting that happened in my life, and there might be a spiritual message underneath it, or a what do you call it, an inspirational aspect to it. And I love doing that because dance is my first language, and when I'm dancing, it's easy for me to just talk. I don't have to think about it so much, and people tend to get a lot out of it. So I love dancing in that way because then, I'm not auditioning. I'm not dying for you to like me enough to give me a job or anything like that. I'm just letting the creative energy flow.
I
So
love it.
yeah.
Well, and I know you're also doing some stuff on YouTube as well. If you want to tell folks about that, and that link's going to be in the podcast description as well.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, my website is StephenWashingtonExperience.com. And on my website, you can get access to all of my social media accounts. I'm on YouTube, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all the platforms, and I have um, so many videos out there that are really useful to people. Some of them are movement based, some of them are just me talking direct to camera, like I'm having a conversation with you, talking about something that I find meaningful or interesting. So people can always find me there.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's jump into some fun random questions. How about it?
Yeah.
All right. Do you have an interest or a hobby that people might be surprised to learn about? Maybe something you don't talk about.
Um, well, people don't know that I knit. I don't do it all the time, but these hands can knit.
Where
I
did that come about?
That came about when I was doing The Lion King, and I was a swing, and I wasn't always on stage every night. So I learned how to knit from the dressers who worked at the theater. And so yeah, I can knit one, purl two. I can do that.
I'll be damned. That's pretty cool. Um, oh, here's a new question I'm adding here. I'm trying to bring in some new questions. People were like, hey, change it up a bit. Um, would you rather play the villain or the hero in a movie?
Oh, the villain.
Right?
Mhm.
Any particular genre or like film series or storyline?
It would either be a James Bond or it would have to be like a Marvel film, like superheroes or something supernatural. I
I
got to be a villain with powers.
Yes. Yeah. Like me, it'd be a Sith, like in a Star Wars thing. But I could see
Oh,
you,
yeah.
like you would have that charm as a Bond villain that it's like, oh, This guy, because it's always the unsuspecting, like, oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's where the fun would lie. Um, let's see.
These are fun. I like these questions.
Yeah, I always enjoy it. Some people are like, you should just do a podcast like 10 minutes long called Random Questions. So, if you're having a rough day, what are the best ways to cheer you up or that you cheer
Hmm.
yourself up?
Hmm. Usually it's to get out and take a walk.
Mm,
Usually get outside, take a walk. Um, and often it's just to move my body, like to do even just to do 5 or 10 minutes of qigong
mm.
can totally just shift my energy around and just give me a different perspective. Just give me it's like we say in recovery, move a muscle, change a thought. That's what I do. That's what I do.
And it's so true. It's
Hmm.
so true. And in addition to, as I've started to gain greater curiosity about qigong, meditation, and breath work, just like how much all of that. I've been doing yin yoga. My mentors kind of got me into
Totally.
that. Some wonderful deep stretching that it's like we've been identifying this. This is where you keep a lot of that trauma harness. Neck, shoulders, groin, all these things, and getting into these deep stretches and staying in them. It's like, oh my goodness! But then afterwards, you're like, ah, I
Yeah.
feel light.
Yes. Yeah. You had an emotional release.
Yeah.
It's great.
Best and worst advice you ever received.
Ooh. It's hard for me to think about the worst advice I ever received, but I can tell you some of the worst advice my mother received
Mm.
that she shared with me. Remember when she was younger and she was dealing with my father drank a lot. And she went to her mother and she's like, Mom, Jimmy, he drinks a lot and I don't know what to do and it's really a problem. And my grandmother said, well, drink with him.
Oh,
And that's what she did.
yeah,
That's bad
that's
advice.
some of the worst advice I've ever heard. No disrespect to your grandma. I'm sure she was a beautiful lady, but oh,
Yeah. She was an addict too, so what can you do?
sure,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
And
But
that's that remember the source.
yeah, yeah. Some of the best advice I got was that it's okay to change your mind.
Mm.
Back to what we were talking about earlier. When I was thinking about moving to California from New York, I was so worried that I was making the wrong decision. Or that once I moved to California, that I was stuck, and if it didn't work, I was stuck here. And my friend said, "You can always change your mind. You can always come back if it doesn't feel right." And I honestly had not, before he said that, I had not even considered that. That's how my mind was so black and white at that time. So just my friend Dean at the time sharing that just totally opened up my world. It's amazing what people can say to us if we're receptive to it. The littlest thing can have such tremendous impact.
Hmm. Hmm. Wow. Yeah. I love that. All right, let's try one more random question. This is a new one too. Is there a movie, TV show that you've watched recently or a book that you've read that has had a good impact on you, and what was your biggest takeaway?
A book that I just read for a meditation teacher training course that I'm doing. One of the books was called The Luminous Self.
Mm.
It's written by a woman named Tracy Stanley. She is a yoga nidra teacher. And one of the chapters, she talks about our ancestors having our backs and that we can always turn to our ancestors for much needed strength and support. And that our ancestors don't even have to be blood relatives. They can just be people who were impactful or very important people in our lives. I love hearing that because I know that where I am today, it's like I stand on the shoulders of many people in order to be where I am today. So it's good for me to be reminded of that and to honor the people that have given me so much. Like my stepmother Diane gave me so much. She wasn't a blood relative, of course, but she she gave me so much. And if she were still alive, she'd be so proud of me at what I've been able to accomplish. And not even just materially, but what I've been able to accomplish in terms of the kind of person that I am and how I've showed up for life. Yeah.
Thank you.
So the luminous self. Check it out, everybody.
I will. Thank you. That was beautiful. Stephen, this is where I like to give you the floor. Anything that you would want to lend, words of positivity, hope, encouragement, maybe those struggling, loved one of someone who's really struggling.
Yeah. First thing that comes to mind is no matter what you're going through, just know you're not alone. You're not alone. There are people that have been where you've been, um, and know the kind of struggles you have in a very intimate way. So I hope that you find those people. And I think that this whole journey, recovery journey, everything is about becoming more and more of who we are. Mm. Not somebody else, who we are. And when I'm more of who I am, I give you an invitation to become more and more of who you are. Because who you really are, like Jason, who you really are is absolutely enough and is needed in the world. And nobody can do what you do the way you do it. And that's important.
Boy, you're trying to get those tears out of me, aren't you? Uh, woo. Yeah, gave me chills. Okay, let me focus here. The book is Recovering You, Soul Care and Mindful Movement for Overcoming Addiction. Stephen, thank you so much for your time. I feel I've gained a new friend here, not only in this recovery journey, but just in general. You're a beautiful person, and I just really appreciate your time in this conversation. We'll have to do it again.
Thank you so much, Jason. Like I feel like I've discovered a brother from another mother.
There you have it. On that note, remember no outside solutions to inside problems and keep knocking doors down.